right, you regicidal 911 callers. It's time to dust off your starter jackets, rip off those tearaways, and blow into your game cartridges. I'm Sean Kelly.
I'm Simon Blandford.
I'm Marty T.
And we wish it was the 90s. And I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to our guest speaker today, Marty T. There have been a few complaints online that our podcast wasn't culturally diverse enough, so we brought on a man of the arts, a man who knows more Simpsons than the Blandfords put together. Welcome, Marty.
What an introduction. Thanks, guys. Long-time listener, first-time contributor. I've loved the work that's been going on so far and excited to dive into one of my favourite shows growing up as a child in the 90s as well. So, yeah, good to be here.
Awesome, Marty. Now, listeners, you might notice that regular announcer Sam Blandford isn't with us today. He recently installed a pool and is now too cool for the podcast. So I'll hand over to Simon to get through the run sheet.
What a great segue, thank you, Sean. So I'm going to run through the episode, which starts in a very interesting way. A heat wave all across Springfield, and no one can really abide this heat. So after some serious nagging from Lisa and Bart, Homer agrees to get a pool. Despite the fact the family seem to be constantly struggling with money, they can't afford to buy a pool. The pool is bought immediately. The neighbourhood friends and just randoms come round, and I mean immediately. The second the pool is ready, a knock on the door and a shy Jimbo Jones is immediately asking Marge whether they can play in the pool. And they do, but Bart, after a dive off the treehouse gone wrong, thanks to Nelson Muntz, breaks his leg. Therein really lies the first part of the episode. And then it moves to a very dark part. This episode is actually called Bart of Darkness. And Bart becomes a recluse once he breaks his leg. He can't go swimming, he's no longer popular, and Lisa steals this crown of popularity from Bart, and this is something Bart struggles to take. He locks himself in his room, he shuts the blinds, and becomes very odd and weird, as Marge says at one point. This goes on for a considerable amount, lots of weird stuff going on with Bart. And then, as a gift from Lisa, who kind of is just feeling guilty, she gets him a telescope, which Bart uses to look at a very boring shot of space and just the general people in the neighbourhood and exercising Dr. Hibbert, amongst other things. Then he discovers what he believes is a murder. Ned Flanders burying the body of his wife, which leads to the first time you watch it, of course, a very scary scene where Lisa tries to find out what really happened in the body of Maud Flanders. Turns out it's not the body of Maud Flanders at all. Ned has overwatered one of Maud's plants, which is why he earlier said he was a diddly erderer. And everything is wrapped up in a neat little package. And the episode finishes. I absolutely loved this episode when I watched it for the first time, and I just found it hilarious this time. I feel like I've been talking a lot, but I need to go over some movie references and other references with you. Heart of Darkness, of course, the episode is called Bart of Darkness. Heart of Darkness is a book by Joseph Conrad.
Would you say, Simon, that's where the similarities stop?
With what?
The book and the episode?
Yeah, there's not really... I can't see any similarities at all. Have you read Heart of Darkness? I have.
Have you read it, Marty?
Absolutely not.
It's like a weird sort of colonial book from the British perspective that paints Indigenous Africans as savages. Am I on the right
Yeah, I didn't really understand much of it when I read it. It's just this guy called Kurtz who goes down the river, and yeah, very interesting book. But I haven't really looked into the deep and meaningful stuff with that book at all.
Yeah, I remember reading a book by a African author that's like a critique of it from the point of view of the tribesmen. It's like, because it's like I guess Heart of Darkness is supposed to be some sort of British classic, but it's just a classic white people view of the world at the time it was written, and that's probably enough about Heart of Darkness.
Yeah, yeah, and that became the quite famous, almost more famous than the book itself now, is Apocalypse Now, the Marlon Brando movie, and that's what it was adapted into. But there are a very few references here to look at. One thing that I saw was Planet of the Apes, of course, the Itchy and Scratchy cartoon. Were there any others that you guys found before I move on to one last one?
I don't know about specific references. I suppose the Nelson's excellent use of the classic schoolyard epidermis joke,
A joke.
Followed by his even better explanation of why it's a good joke. And then the classic Krusty episodes sort of referencing old talk shows and how sort of bad they are. I quite enjoyed that, but not sort of actual pop culture or anything like that. Just a few favourite parts. Got a few other ones I might mention later. What about you, Mardo?
One of the ones I thought that was quite classic of the 90s when Bart arrived at the hospital to get his cast was the nurse who was smoking a cigarette at the time said, "Get this kid a magazine, stat." I thought was a really good picture of the way that health issues were dealt with at the time, perhaps.
Yeah, it was so good. Yeah, and the couple of other things just to touch on what Bob said, not quite as linked to the 90s, but Simpsons was such a popular show, but they weren't really afraid to just throw in these pop culture references that not really even pop culture references. You know, there was that guy that Krusty interviewed. I looked him up, and he was some union leader who was prominent in the 60s. You know, and basically no one's going to get that joke, but it's so funny that it doesn't matter. So I just thought that was fantastic. It was a very bold show. So we've talked about that storyline, the basic storyline there of Bart of Darkness.
Just one other thing, Si, that I just sort of thought of. Yeah. So I think you mentioned it in your sort of covering of the storyline, but the sort of the sequence of Lisa going into the house is actually sort of animated like a horror film. Like, yes. It's quite well put together. I was like, this is, the way Ned's, going up to the attic and his hand reaching for things and the way he's holding the axe and like the shadows and stuff. It's like they've clearly gone, let's make this like a classic horror movie, which is mint.
Oh, the storyboarding's just brilliant. They've spent so much time storyboarding that quote unquote horror scene, as you say. No, it's there's some clever people working on that show, all right? So we're going to give the aforementioned Marty T the honour of being the first to announce his MVP of the episode, as well as Best Supporting Actor for the episode. So Marty, let's throw it to you.
I've really gone for probably the easiest one. I thought the Bart was my MVP, although there was a couple of ones that were close, but I thought probably the best supporting cast member, underrated, Martin Prince. I thought his contribution, not only having a pool himself to end on, but I thought the foreshadowing of his misfortune whilst arriving in the Simpsons pool with something along the lines of, I think it was 17 layers of swimming costumes, as they call them in the States, to which they were very, very rapidly all removed by his loving and loyal friends. So those are my two.
Right choices.
Hey, Bob.
So my MVP for this episode is Homer. He's certainly not a major character, but I think nearly every scene he's in, he steals. When he blows the beer at like a fountain during the synchronized swimming bit, it was lovely. And there's a few other bits as well, but I don't want to mention them quite yet because they link in with some of my favourite quotes. And then I'm going to go for supporting Lisa. I quite often find Lisa a little bit annoying, but it was nice to see her give in to popularity and perhaps just reveling in what's going on rather than perhaps being whatever else sometimes she contributes. I quite enjoyed her this episode, and she played a key part in the ending horror scene, which I really liked.
Very fair, Bob. A much maligned character is Lisa sometimes, but a very necessary straight gal, as it were. I was stunned by the Homer pick, and I'm going to reveal that my picks are exactly the same as Marty's. I had Bart first. You know, it is the obvious pick because he is the sort of the main character in this episode, but I just thought some of Bart's lines are great. He kind of is, for some reason, making some Dickensian play with these crazy character names and stuff, and just a little bit of strangeness and oddness that we don't always see from Bart. So I quite like that. And Martin Prince, Marty's namesake, was just outstanding on every level. That final scene where his bare ass is flapping in the wind and he's singing "A Gentle Wind Came Blowing In From Across the Sea" is, the gentle caress of the summer breeze. I've written that down. That was just outstanding. Martin Prince, he's good whenever he appears, and I can't give my usual MVP, which is Mr. Burns, because he doesn't appear in this episode, so have to give it to Bart.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, I think it's fair. Do we have a favourite part of the storyline? We'll go to you, Bob. I mean, it's a fairly linear storyline, but there's those three parts to it. First part where they get
perhaps instead of saying favourite part, maybe I'll mention favourite moments.
Yeah, moments, scenes. Go for it.
So the opening scene of Hans Moleman. Well, you're certainly doing your job today, Mr. Sun. Oh, rats. As he lights himself on fire. I really like that, they establish the heat wave really well, and then they've got the hippie getting punched as well. I quite enjoy that. The chili truck, I thought was a nice gag.
Great gag.
So yeah, I suppose a little bit Millhouse signing Millpool on the cast is great. And I think I already mentioned it, but I really enjoy Classic Krusty. But yeah, probably my favourite part, which I've harped on a lot about, is the horror scene with Ned.
Very well done. What about yourself?
To agree with you, Bob, there with the Hans Moleman opening. I think there's no better character on The Simpsons to illustrate the struggle than Hans. And a couple of the other moments that I quite enjoyed. I always used to like what they would call various different companies. And the place where the buyer is our chum.
I noticed that. It's good.
Which I thought was quite nice. Yeah, which is quite a nice touch. And what was the other one I had here? The line that Homer said, which was probably the one that was going to sway me between Bart and Homer for my MVP, was Bart said, "Oh, man, I'm going to miss all summer." And Homer turned to him in kind of a creepy way and said, "Don't worry, boy. When you get a job like me, you'll miss every summer." And Homer's so perfect at illustrating that middle-aged struggle through life.
Definitely down on my list of phenomenal quotes from the episode as well.
It's down there, and I just added, Marty, it's why you become a teacher. through that quote. Yeah, I think just to touch on what both of you have said, really, the setup of the storyline is so well planned. So Bob's already mentioned so many, you've already mentioned so many. One part, the fridge, a tent in the fridge. It's cool in here, boy. I got the idea when I noticed the refrigerator was cold. Homer just...
It's my number one pick for quotes.
No, I've stolen it. It's such a funny line in of itself, but the delivery, he's so smug, as if this is I am the only person that could have thought of this. And this horrendously obvious but also terrible idea was just fantastic. And I thought that first setup was actually my favourite part of the episode. We've got some quotes. I've stolen Sean's. Best.
So did Marty. One was the refrigerator quote and one was the Miss Every Summer quote, but I've got some backups.
Before we do the quotes, I've got one other part I do want to speak to about the boldness, read the Krusty the Clown thing. That dance / synchronized swimming scene that you mentioned that culminates in Homer, coming in on the tube and doing the beer fountain. So obviously this is referencing some old movie or show, but I've got no idea what it was. But it's still so well done. It's really watchable and enjoyable, which kind of tells you how meticulously it is planned. I imagine not even understanding the reference and still enjoying it.
Yeah, it's awesome. There's probably, like you've said, multiple references in here that just go over our heads because we're just having a great time. I noticed as I was watching, I wrote less and less notes as the episode went on because I was just having such a great time.
Yeah, and I did look up what that was a reference to, and apparently it was a reference to films by a choreographer called Busby Berkeley, whose last film he did was 1943. So, just casually 50 years after his last film, they decided to chuck in a subtle reference to his choreography, which I thought was fantastic. So we move now to our favourite quotes. We're going to just do a round table so we don't keep stealing the best quotes, like poor old Sean. He's had 2 quotes stolen already. So because of that, I think it's only fair to go to Sean, then Marty, then me. So take it away, Sean.
Right. So 2 down, 3 really, because I already talked about Mr. Sun. It's got a couple here, but I'm going to go with definitely what I think is probably my favourite. You have selected Regicide. If you know the name of the king or queen being murdered, press 1.
Classic. I had a few notes about the old classic IVR system. My favourite was towards the end of the episode when they were putting together the pieces as to what actually supposedly happened to Maud.
Damn it.
So it was when Bart said, I distinctly heard Ned say that Maud was with God now. To which she replied back, I was with God. I was at Bible camp. I was learning how to be more judgmental. Classic way to religion in a funny way, I thought, which they usually do with the Flanders family.
Loved it. Absolutely loved that. So good. Yeah, that was... I've got another one from that scene. I don't know whether I should use it now, but I'm not going to. I'm going to go to just in the heyday of the pool where Bart is still healthy. He's still happy. Marge is in the lounge and there's just kids just like flying around everywhere, teenagers as well, and she's just making about 4 loaves worth of peanut butter sandwiches, and she says in a sort of a grumpy voice, "Bart, are all these children friends of yours?" And Bart says, "Friends and well-wishers." And 3 teenagers who are like 16 say, "Hello, Bart," to some fat kid who we've never seen before, followed by the last teenager saying, "Hello, Mrs Cumberdale," to Marge. So I think that has to be my number one quote in this episode, and just one of the great Simpsons quotes ever, really. I just thought that was so funny. The combination of them saying hello to the fat kid and calling him Bart, and then saying hello, Mrs Cumberdale, was great. So that's my top one, probably. Bob, what else you got for him?
I'm surprised this quote has lasted this long without being said, because "'tis a fine barn, but sure 'tis no pool, English."
Was this episode before or after the Amish episode?
Ooh, I want to say before, because this is season 6, right?
I also want to say before. I don't know that, for sure, but off the top of my head, that's what I would say.
Choice not to bring in them damn Mennonites.
Yeah, I hate those shiftless Mennonites.
You're up, Marty, for quote 2.
My second one was on the back of another decent quote from Lisa, which was, "Our salvation isn't going to come along on the back of a truck," and then sure enough, the pull truck pulls up. But the quote itself, which was my second one, was at the end when Otto Man mentioned that, time's up. He said, "We've got to jam this thing full of Epsom salts and take it back to the old folks' home."
I watched this last night. I don't even remember that. Oh, that's
good.
It's a great one. And bonus points for the reference, the impersonation, I should say, of Otto Man there. That was fantastic.
When I was watching that scene, for the first time it dawned on me that Otto probably shouldn't be driving a school bus wearing headphones.
Or a pull truck with a missing window at the back.
I think it's me, isn't it now? I'm very excited. I've only said one quote. Oh, I did steal that other one from Bob, so I guess it's not technically correct. I'm not even sure this is really truly a quote, more of a sequence, but there is a quote at the end. So, as you all know, Bob, because you weren't on the first Simpsons one, but this is one of my things that I got off Chris Turner, who wrote the book Planet Simpson. The Simpsons are the kings of doing like a good joke, then they top it with a better joke, and then they nail it with like the best joke within a space of like 10 seconds. And my sort of winner for that in this episode was Lisa nosing around in the Flanders' fridge and finds a worryingly head-shaped package in the fridge. And I think the package says human head on it, which is already, a little bit funny. And Lisa wipes away the condensation to reveal what it really says is Schumann Farms head of lettuce, which gives us a bit of a giggle. Then the coup d'etat is Bart saying, "Of course," at the end. Like, of course, that was so obvious that it was really a Schumann Farms head of lettuce. I just thought that was absolutely brilliant, and that's why that gets my vote for number 2.
Excellent. Very good. My last pick comes from the Pool Sharks. "Look, question lady, this job isn't what I really do. I play keyboards."
He was such a keyboarder too, wasn't he? Yeah, he's just that stereotypical guy, ponytail. Oh, I love that quote.
With the curly ponytail.
Oh, Loved it, Bob. Loved it.
Yeah.
Marty, yours,
Excellent.
please.
My one I thought was actually quite clever, and it was a good way to bring in Marge's influence into the show, and she was really sticking true to who she is, in my view, which is an enabler of Homer's idiocy. And I think one of you boys mentioned a wee bit earlier on when Homer had the fridge linked up to the tent. And she comes in her usual nagging tone mentioned, the fridge wasn't meant to be used in this way, homie, but sure is refreshing. And she pops with Lisa and Maggie fully buying into the extender fridge.
That's mint. I quite like in that scene how Maggie just crawls in and has a snooze on the jello.
Yeah.
You saying that, Marty, and again, a wonderful Marge impersonation definitely reminds me of when she says to Homer after some terrible indiscretion that he's done, she says, "Homie, this is a rare lapse of judgment on your part." That's fantastic, Marty. Thank you. And is it me now? This is the last one. Far out. I've still got so many good ones to use. I think this is kind of a classic Simpsons gag. It's a bit of a weird side to Bart that we don't see very often. And Lisa mentions where she got the telescope from that she gifts him and says it was from the Optics Festival. To which Bart says, "There was an Optics Festival and I wasn't informed." Which I thought was very, very good, and I really enjoyed that one. Did we have any other moments? Because we've got really nowhere to be or nowhere to go. Did you have any other ones that you really wanted to get off your chest before we finish up?
My list of 6 quotes have been covered by me and you guys.
One other little situation which I did think was funny, following along the lines of which I mentioned earlier around keeping the characters true to who they are. Mentioned at the opening, Cy, what Bart has a look at around the town when he first had a look through his telescope, and shoots over to the school, and of course he sees in the window Seymour Skinner, fan favourite, furiously sharpening pencils on the old school windy pencil sharpener, which is, classic Skinner.
I think it was like 5:00 a.m. on the clock, or so it was something same time as well when he was there. It was like dark, and Skinner's unlucky not to get a Best Supporting Actor nod really for those 3 seconds.
Yeah, that's exactly what just went through my head.
Look, absolutely great line. A few others I wanted to talk about was the classic Krusty, where he tries to kind of half-heartedly plug these summer reruns that are coming on, and he says, "And we're going to rerun some classic Krusty." He's like the biggest corporate shill you'll ever meet. Bart's entire room is just full up of Krusty crap. Yet he's just a terrible corporate shill. Like when he tastes the ribwich, he says, "I don't mind the taste." He's just like the worst corporate shill of all time. And I think I have one more scene only. Is right at the end, which I thought you were going to talk about, Marty, with your first quote, is when Homer arrogantly takes on the role of detective despite having no frame of reference whatsoever, and approaches Ned and says, "Not everything's wrapped up. There's still a little matter of the whereabouts of your wife." To which Maud says, "I'm right here." And in an extreme close-up, he says, "Oh, I see. Then everything is wrapped up in a neat little package."
That whole sequence from him is phenomenal.
Oh, it's incredible. And then there's this change of like a close-up of Homer leaning into Maud in this like accusatory fashion to then a long shot of all like these just completely blank, confused faces of both Simpsons and Flanders and Lou, Eddie, and Chief Wiggum. I just thought that was a great note to end on for Homer, and now I can't be too critical of your MVP pick, really.
I was about to say, that sounds a little bit like MVP material.
Yeah, very, very close.
Did you guys have any quotes you didn't say?
No.
One of the ones I didn't say was, again, at the Pool Sharks place, was, all right, over here we got the kick tub, the Insta-Rust, lightning magnet. This is the tinkler. Ooh, the tinkler. I like the sound of that.
Yeah, I had heaps more. Another Krusty actually was pretty good in this episode. Like, he could have also got a best supporting actor nod, I felt. Where are these quotes? Oh yeah. And we have on the sitar Ravi Shankar. Groovy, man. That was a real good one. I just quite liked that. Yeah, the Simpsons just go weird, just randomly, and one of those weird random parts was the posh British kid who wants Lisa to go to his country house.
Oh, yeah.
Charades and ever so many romantic misunderstandings. That was awesome.
What I enjoyed about this episode was like it has all that randomness in it, but it doesn't feel forced like later episodes or Family Guy. You know, you know how, and maybe it's not forced in later episodes, but shows like Family Guy have kind of ruined it. But it always feels like it's nonsense for the sake of nonsense. Whereas when you're watching this, it just feels really organic.
100%.
Yeah, no, I thought so too.
There's one other one that I didn't say that is not a quote, but when Lisa's like the popular kid, one of the sort of cutscenes, three kids showing off for Lisa, and the way they're showing off is just like punching a fat kid underwater. I think it's Buddha, maybe.
But it looks like he's waving out to her as well, and not really in a frightened way, but more in a, hi, Lisa, I'm getting hiding.
Exactly. Just like smiling and waving for attention whilst getting wailed on under the water. I love that. That was hilarious. So yeah, those were the two extras that I had.
The only other sitch I was thinking of raising, but I didn't want to bring COVID into it, was obviously in lockdown. But one of you guys mentioned it. I was going to ask you two if either of you had written a play during lockdown in your isolation. Being both.
Mate,
disciplines.
don't worry about bringing up COVID. There's there's an episode of X-Men where there's like they make a virus in a gun and it's airborne, and we spent that episode talking heaps about it. No, but when I got to the UK and I had a bit of time catching a lot of tubes and stuff like that, I started outlining a plot for a book.
Oh.
Yeah.
Bob, before I go to you, Bob, just a huge thanks to Marty for bringing his wealth of wisdom to the show. And I've just sensed by some of the things he said, particularly that Marge enabling comment, he's got a lot more to give in the future. So hopefully he'll be gracious enough to come back on the pod for what we hope will be more Simpsons episodes and this week on. What do you say, Bob?
I 100% agree. And me and Marty have been talking offline, something non-Simpsons related that we're definitely keen to do an episode on. I don't know. I'd love to have someone, whether it's you or Sam or both. Hopefully one of you hasn't seen it, because as to quote the film itself, and now a taste of things to come. Mortal Kombat 1995, maybe arguably one of the greatest game to movie adaptations ever made, according to a very small select group of people that saw it at the time.
I saw it at the movies. It was like a trip to Auckland, so I would be very keen to rewatch, as I don't remember everything about that, funnily enough. Marty, what do you think? Sound good?
One of the great movies. The 90s was a time where a few games tried to have a crack at crossing over onto the silver screen. Some of the other classics that come to mind are Street Fighter, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme as Guile, amongst a few other little classic cameos. But Mortal Kombat, definitely one of my favourites.
What you were about to reference Bob Hoskins in Super Mario Bros.
Another classic.
Oh, that's unwatchable.
All right then, very enjoyable. Sean,
Yeah.
do we have a sign off, or do we just, this is seriously average podcasting? So do we just fade out, a la UB40 in the 90s? What do we do?
Yeah, we'll fade out, but we've seen. I think I don't know when this episode's due to release, but we've had a lot of positive feedback recently from some of our more recent episodes. So feel free to keep hitting us up. Our sort of in the 90s game show styled episodes proved controversial, to say the least, with quite a few people hitting us up in the Slack and sledging us for our selections. So we're all for positive and negative feedback. So just keep it coming. We're on the Instagrams and the Twitters and other various things at WIWT90S. Or you could even slip us a Gmail at WIWT90s@gmail.com, because the only thing that's coming through that at the moment is Podbean trying to make us pay to make our podcast better.
Bastards.
Yeah. Sometimes I almost sign up for stuff and then I remember we're not about that. I'm not really sure what we are about, but we're not about that. Thanks again to Marty, and look forward to our next episode with you and our next episode of whatever it is we're doing next.
Your pleasure, lads.
You guys.